An article popped up on my news feed written by a psychologist, and it was entitled, How to Be Happier in 2019. I thought, I want to be happier. I mean, I'm happy enough. I definitely don't want to be less happy, but given a choice, I'd rather be more happy. I think all of us would say this. Everybody wants to be more happy. And so I clicked on the article and I scanned it really quickly for anything that was highlighted or bold or point form. Because although I do want to be happier, I don't want to have to read an entire article in order to be happier. So this line caught my eye. Here's how to increase your happiness quotient. So here's the thing that the author felt. If you did these things in 2019, it would produce happiness in your life. And Pastor Phil touched on a couple of these. There's going to be a little overlap, but I think it's worth mentioning again. So here's what they were. Volunteer more, exercise more, okay, eat better, save more money. So far, all things that, I feel like we don't really need a psychologist to write an article and tell us about these things. We kind of know this. And lastly, schedule more time for a manicure or pedicure. And I thought, there we go. There it is. There it is. But I'm reading this, and I'm like, this is so obvious. Like, we know these things, besides the mani-pedi, that was gold. But other than that, we know that this is going to make us happier. We know these things. I was hoping for some, less obvious, maybe counterintuitive life tips that you might get like from a wisdom bomb from like Gandalf or Yoda. You know the type that I'm talking about. You're just like, oh, those are so good. Like, the more you learn, the less you know. You've heard that one before. You're kind of like, that actually is true. That feels like that. The more you get into something or learn about something, you realize, man, I don't know anything. Or how about this one? The easiest way to get into a relationship is to be fine being alone. You're like, money, right? That's good. That's good stuff. I wish I knew that when I was a college kid. I was desperate. Anyway. The more you try and impress someone, the less they will like you. These are true, right? These are awesome. They're a little bit different way of looking at things, but they're true. Now, if you want to go to the source of counterintuitive wisdom sayings, really there only is one place to go. The Bible. Now, you'd expect me to say that because I'm preaching, but it is absolutely true. Jesus was the king. He was a king of this stuff. He constantly reframed in the Gospels his disciples' attitudes and ideas of what a successful life looked like. He would take conventional wisdom and he'd just continually flip the script on it. Now, no matter what you think about Jesus, whether you're here today and you worship him as the Son of God, or whether you're here today and you think, there's something about him, he has some good teaching, he's a moral teacher for sure, I know that much. Or maybe you think something entirely different about him. Wherever you are, it's undeniable that Jesus said some really remarkable things that have stuck, even 2,000 years later. And today, we're going to dive into one particular thing that he said that leaves us a little bit scratching our heads. This is what he says in Matthew 16. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Let's just stop right there for a second. Just say, if you want to follow me, if you want me as your leader, here's what you need to do. Step 1, deny yourself. Step 2, take up your cross. This is so countercultural and so upside down and different than how we're used to being led by someone or how we experience life. If we want to vote for a politician, we vote for what they're going to give us in return. If we follow someone online, we do it for whatever information or inspiration they can give us. And Jesus is saying, if you want to follow me, you want to deny yourself. Act totally different, contrary to your nature. Right there, Jesus sets off right at the beginning that he is a different type of leader, a different type of Lord, a different type of ruler, and we are to be different type of people. But then he continues and says this, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. So if I want to save my life, I have to lose it, but if I lose it for Jesus' sake, I will find it. So maybe you're doing a little mental math right now. How does that work? Carry the one, and you're just a little bit messed up. The truth is, Christians could be following Jesus for decades and still trying to figure out what this means. And I would lump myself into that as well. I would argue that the entirety of the Christian life is trying to figure out this very one thing. And for the next 8 weeks, that's what we're going to do. For the next 8 weeks here, we are going to figure out what Jesus meant when he said, if you want to find your life, you have to lose it for my sake. Now, why would we spend so much time talking about this? Because everybody wants to be more happy. There's this universal desire, regardless of race or faith background or gender. I have never met somebody who wants to be more miserable in the future than they are now. Everybody envisions a future version of themselves that is happier and healthier than they are currently. Now, when I say happy, I'm talking about a particular type of happiness. Not a type of happiness that comes around at payday, or comes around Christmas morning when you get that gift you wanted, or when your team makes the playoffs, or when you smell a puppy's breath. That's kind of my thing, right? Or, when you get to sleep in. Now, those things are great, and those things can make you situationally happy. But what about the times in life when things don't go the way that you hoped or that you wished they would? Because for many people in here, that has been your story. Life has not turned out the way that I wanted it to. Is it possible to be happy and be broke? Is it possible to be happy and not get what you wanted? Is it possible to be happy and your team doesn't make the playoffs? Is it possible to be happy and have your heart broken? Is it possible to be happy when life totally goes sideways on you? Can you still be at peace? Can you still have total contentment and satisfaction and fulfillment in your life when it goes the way that you wish it didn't? The answer that Jesus gives is yes. And he invites us into a totally new way of thinking and living. The way that life was meant to be lived and created and designed to be lived. Now, I have, as many of you do, an iPhone in my pocket. And this is arguably one of the most greatest inventions created in the most recent memory. Now, I've had one for a little while, and so I know a little bit about it. I know enough to get by. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm definitely better than my mom at it, right? But I'm not an expert, but I know enough, all right? I've had it for a while that I've learned to use it. Now, Steve Jobs is credited with being the creator of this phone. He would know way more about this than I would. If you want to know about all of its features, if you want to know how to use it best for its design and what it's capable of, who would you rather ask? Me? My mom? Steve Jobs? Rather ask its creator. He would know best. And it's true that you have a creator. You are not random. You are not a bag of cells. You are not smart mud or a monkey wearing pants. You are designed by a creator. So who better to listen to on how to maximize and get the most out of your life and be your happiest and most fulfilled and satisfied self than your creator? And Jesus says this: if you want to find your life, if you want to make the most out of every moment that I've given you, if you want to live according to the way that I designed you, then here it is. If you want to find your life, you must lose it for my sake. Honestly, that doesn't sound like a great deal. That doesn't really sound like something that we want to do voluntarily. It sounds disruptive. The reality is it totally is. Jesus' way of life that he invites us into, it touches on every single solitary area of our life. How we make decisions, how we handle money, how we view ourselves, how we view work, and maybe most radically, how we view relationships. I recently listened to a TED Talk from a professor named Robert Waldinger. The title of his talk was this: What Makes a Good Life? Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness. And he opens his talk with this question: what keeps you happy and healthy as you go through life? They found in their research, 80% of millennials answered this question by saying, getting rich. 50% of those who answered also said, being famous. Getting rich and being famous would make you happy and healthy. A quick look at the news would show that that's not true. Robert is the current director of something called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And they have been, get this, tracking the same group of men for the past 80 years. The same group of men. 724 men from two different distinct groups. The first group is that of Harvard grads, and the second group are boys from the poorest neighborhood in Boston. Now, as you can imagine, over 80 years, they have seen these lives take a vast array of different directions. Some became bricklayers and others lawyers. One even became the president of the United States. Some became alcoholics, others schizophrenics. Some climbed to the very top of the social ladder, and some went from the top to the very bottom. Now, at regular intervals throughout the study, they interviewed the men, they interviewed their wives, interviewed their children, and they learned a lot. They also did regular medical examinations at different intervals throughout the study as well. They scanned their brains, they drew their blood, the whole deal. And here's what they concluded. Here's two things that they learned from the longest study ever on happiness. Number one, loneliness kills. Isolated people are less happy, they live shorter lives, and their brain degenerates faster than those who are not lonely. Number two, it's not the amount of close relationships that someone has, but it's the quality of those relationships that matter most. They found that people living in conflict or harboring unforgiveness, that they actually found that it was quite bad for your health and your quality of life. The study could predict at the age of 50 how people were going to grow old. People with the most satisfaction in the relationships at the age of 50 were the happiest when they were 80, regardless of any other circumstance in their life. In other words, the most important indicator of the happiness quotient of your life is your relationships. It's not money. It's definitely not fame. It's not comfort. It's not vacations. It's not your job. It's not even volunteering more, exercising more, eating more, saving more money. And would you believe it? It has nothing to do with manis or petties. Nothing to do with it. Your happiness quotient is directly tied to the quality of your relationships. But here's the problem. We know that. I just spent like literally 10 minutes telling you something you know, right? I'm sorry for wasting your time. But we know that. The problem is it's really hard. Relationships are really, really difficult. They are. I mean, wouldn't it just be so much better if you could just buy a TV, right, and make it better? And maybe some of you tried that in Boxing Week, and it just hasn't worked out for you. I went the smart home route. I bought an Amazon Alexa, and I thought maybe that could make my life better. I asked it. I even asked it. I tried it out for this message. I recorded it, but it didn't work out very well. I said, "Can you help me be a better spouse?" It replied, "I don't know how to help you with that." And I said, "I need help." And he said, "Call 911. I was like, okay. A Google Home can't do it. Okay, Siri, it can't help you. It can barely set an alarm for me. It can't help you increase the happiness quotient in your life. Relationships are slow. They're messy. They require energy. It would be so much easier, and it is so much easier, to live just for you, to create and live in your own bubble. I, for one, I love the bubble that I've created in my life. I've mentioned this before here, but I am quite introverted. My perfect morning consists of waking up, drinking coffee, exercising, making a ridiculous big breakfast, reading, all before anyone wakes up. My perfect night consists of eating ice cream and hanging out with my wife and kids. I do not ever want to go to a concert. I have no desire. Never invite me to a concert. I do not want to go. I do not want to go to a hockey game. I have stress and fear recounting my time in Disneyland this past year. I hate crowds. I hate the idea of it. My dream home when I was a kid was one with a front attached garage. That was it, so that I could drive in and not see anybody and my neighbors and talk to them when I went into my house. I'm not even joking. That was literally my dream. When I have plans with someone and they call me and cancel at the last minute, I am thrilled about it, all right? I love it, okay? Some of you get what I'm saying, and some of you think I'm just the worst person in the world. But regardless, it's true. That's honestly how I feel. But I have unknowingly built routines, patterns in my life to insulate me from people. And it's not that I don't like people. I absolutely love people. They are the best part of my life, hands down. But the bubble that I've created is so much easier, and it's so much more comfortable. And as awkward as that might be for me to admit, I know that there's a lot of people in this room who would just say, yeah, that's totally me. And there are other people in here who are, extroverts, for sure. They're charged up by being around others. You can have a lot of relationships, but they're low quality. You can be surrounded by people and still be lonely. And many of us have built routines, maybe more accurately called fences, that have kept ourselves in and others people out. And for me, it's because of comfort. For other people, it might be because of a hurt you're trying to defend yourself against. But we are prone to isolation. And that's exactly what bubbles are. They're isolating devices. And loneliness kills. Mother Teresa said, loneliness is the epidemic of the world. And an article in Psychology Today said this: there's never been more people in the world than there are today, yet we are lonelier than we ever have been. And so it might actually be true. Your happiness quotient is directly tied to the quality of your relationships. At least Jesus seemed to think so as well. There's this conversation recorded in the book of Matthew in the New Testament between Jesus and what the Bible refers to as an expert in the law. This was a Pharisee. It's a religious leader who knew the Old Testament inside and out. And it's really cool that this conversation is recorded for us because it's so meaningful and it really highlights the heart of God for us today. But here's some context before I read it. The Pharisees, they did not like Jesus. I don't know if you've ever had someone in your life that they're the type of people that just push all of your wrong buttons. They don't necessarily even have to really be doing anything, but they just bug you, right? Not me, that's never happened to me, but I'm just, maybe that's happened to you before. Jesus was that person for the Pharisees. They did not like him. People were flocking to Jesus as their rabbi, and the problem for the Pharisees is that Jesus wasn't really a rabbi. He didn't go through the traditional means of becoming a rabbi. He wasn't really recognized by them as that, but his life and his teaching were gaining momentum and followers, and this put the way of life for the Pharisees at jeopardy because their power and their life and their influence revolved around them being the experts and them being the authority on God and all religious things. And so in order to neutralize the threat of Jesus, they would constantly try to puzzle him or ensnare him or trap Jesus. They were really the ones that coordinated Jesus' death. But in this conversation that we're about to peek into, this is what's happening. The Pharisees are trying to trap Jesus. And this is what it says. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Teacher, didn't really consider him as a teacher. It's a little bit of a poke. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it, meaning the second is just as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all of the prophets, meaning all of the law that you study, all of the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, they hang on these two commandments. Now, the Pharisees had taken the Old Testament, those Hebrew scriptures, and they had classified them into over 600 different laws. And they would have this debate amongst themselves. Which one is the greatest commandment? Some would say circumcision, others would say some sort of sacrificial law, and someone would say something else. And so there wasn't really a definitive answer up to this point on what was the greatest command. And they weren't asking Jesus because they cared about his opinion or he was an authority on the matter. They were just trying to, again, trap him. If Jesus elevated one command over the others, then he would vilify the others and it would kind of off-put people in the crowd and he would lose a little bit of credibility. That's what's happening in this story. But Jesus highlights something from Deuteronomy chapter 6, and essentially he says this, all of those 600 plus laws that you've created and you spent your entire life trying not to break, well, you wouldn't have broke them if you just did this one thing. If you just set your gaze on loving God with everything that you have and also other people, not just God, other people too. Now, the Pharisees were great at trying to orient their life to do the first, to set their life up as to love and obey God. But they were miserable at the second of loving other people. And I love how high of a value Jesus places on loving other people. In fact, this might sound a little bit odd, but I'm proud. I know it sounds odd, but I'm proud of Jesus. I'm proud of this idea that loving others is at the heart of Christianity. I wish everybody knew that. I wish we all lived like that. I just love that that's true. I love that it's true up here. In reality, I wish Jesus would have said this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. This is the first and greatest commandment. Check, I agree. That's no problem. Let's do that. And the second is just like it. Love your bubble. That would be easier. I could do that. I could do the church thing, I could pray, I could read scripture, I could give my time and my treasure to the church, I could nurture a friendship with Jesus. But I could keep driving right into my garage and ignoring my neighbor. I could do this thing. That's not too difficult. I'm a Pharisee in that way. This one's not too difficult. What's more difficult for me is this one. The vertical's okay, the horizontal is definitely more challenging for me. But Jesus didn't say that. And this commandment is like taking out a big old needle and popping my bubble and maybe yours that you have enjoyed living in. Jesus says that the most important thing that you can do with your life is not run a successful business, is not get good grades, is not find the perfect spouse, is not to experience maximum comfort. But the most important thing that you can do with your life is to pursue a high-quality relationship with God and with others. And when I say others, I don't mean the people that you've given permission to live in your bubble. Okay, I don't mean that person that you're dating or maybe your spouse or your kids or your parents or someone who's really close to you. And I don't mean that because Jesus didn't mean that. Listen to what Jesus says a little earlier in Matthew. He says this, "You have heard it been said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you." Imagine just on this. Imagine if you just did this. Imagine if our leaders just did this. Imagine how this would radically change the world if we lived out Jesus' teaching on this. How upside down, how different are we to live as Jesus followers, and how different of a leader and a Lord and a ruler is Jesus. But what's cool, Jesus used the exact same word as he does to love God and love others and your neighbors as he does for loving your enemy, which means there is no escape clause. There is no loophole. There is no unpoppable bubble that you could build that can't be popped. I want to circle back to the beginning for a moment because remember what Jesus says. He says, Matthew 16, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." We have natural reactions, we have natural behaviors that we operate in with our relationships, just the usual common ways that we deal with people. When someone hurts us, it's not only acceptable, but even encouraged to hurt them back or cut them out, or it's permissible to have unforgiveness towards that person until they make amends with us. Then maybe we'll repair that relationship. It's a totally normal thing to live for years where you do and not to know your neighbors at any sort of significant level. It's totally normal to attend church week after week and never join a group, never join a serve team, and never make really good friends with people that you see virtually every single week. If left to our own devices, we will gravitate towards isolation. In other words, if we did it our way, Jesus is saying, you'll lose your life. Not that you'll drop dead, but you'll totally miss out on how you were designed to live. The potential that God has placed in you for fulfillment and happiness will be lost if you handle relationships your way. But if you're willing to lose your way, which means operating in humility, and adopt Jesus' way in your relationships, you'll begin to walk more and more into the absolute best life possible that God has created you for. And he would know. He says that the most important thing you can invest your life in, developing and pursuing a relationship with God and with your neighbors. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be everyone's best friend. That sounds to me absolutely terrible and stressful, and a lot of invites out to concerts and hockey games. But it does mean that if you want maximum fulfillment in your life, you must prioritize over everything your relationship with God and your relationship with your neighbors, or who are best considered your neighbors. Now, I thought that there might be something rich for us in this word neighbor, because the New Testament was written in Greek and Aramaic, and maybe there's a little bit of a connotation of the word that was lost in translation, and so I decided to do a deep word study on this word neighbor, what it meant. And so I have all these fancy tools, cross-reference, and so here's what I learned what neighbor means in Greek. This is what it means. Neighbor. It means neighbor, okay? Neighbors actually means your neighbors. I refuse to believe that it is God honoring and pleasing to be placed where you live and to ignore the people around you. The people right beside you. I mean, I'm talking about where you live. People right beside you who might not know Christ, who might not have the hope that you have. And to ignore them because you love your bubble most is a tragedy. God has placed you where you are on purpose for a purpose. And it's to love him and to love your neighbors. Your neighbors. Now, for some of us, that's a no-brainer. It's easy. You can do that. You know your neighbor's names, 3 doors down, you hang out with them, that's fine. That's great. For others like myself, that is a really tough thing to do. But I can tell you from my experience that is so rewarding developing those relationships. When I moved to Edmonton 3 years ago, I hardly knew anybody in the city. And for 10 seconds, I had this insane amount of courage where I acted like someone that I wanted to be, not who I was. And I went up, even before I purchased my house and signed the line, I went up to my neighbor and I rang the doorbell. And I said, "Hi, my name's Ken." And I remember being so nervous and sweaty, and it was just nasty. And I met for the first time Corey and Mel, who I love. I love Corey and Mel. They are friends to me. Our dogs live in each other's yards and each other's houses. We're friends. We bond over life and over construction projects, and it's so rewarding. And God is in that relationship, and I'm so glad that I did that. So when Jesus says love your neighbor, he is talking about your neighbor, but he's also talking about the people who you best consider neighbor, the people in your workplace, the people who you sit beside in class or on the bus, people at your favorite restaurant that you see all the time, the people who are sitting in the row with you at church or who you see in the lobby. He's also talking about your parents and your kids and your spouse. He's including all of that. So here's a question that I want to leave with you today. Where do you need your bubble popped most? Maybe it's a relationship that needs repairing. As I'm talking, you just know that person. I need to send that text. I have unforgiveness, and I don't know how to get rid of it, but I need to do something. Maybe for you, you need to pursue a higher quality in a pre-existing relationship. Maybe for you, I know this is what it was for me when I was saying, "God, search my heart." What are you saying to me? For me, God was saying, "You need to be a better friend. You're not a great friend, Ken." I'm like, Holy Spirit, all that conviction stuff. For me, it was being a better friend, but maybe for you it's that, or maybe it's being a better spouse or a better parent. You need to be more vulnerable or real or present or intentional in that relationship. What does that look like for you? Maybe for you, God is saying, you need 10 seconds of insane courage, and you need to introduce you to someone new. You need new friends. And I know that gets a lot harder as you get older. I know. But maybe it's time to finally join that group that you said that you were going to join. Or finally be used in a capacity of serving where you can meet other people and develop really great relationships. Now, for some of you, maybe you have that neighbor part down. You have fulfilling relationships with other people. But as I talk about this God thing, you're kind of thinking, I don't know about that part. Is it even possible to have friendship with God and relationship with God? The whole point of the Bible, the whole point of the New Testament and the gospel is this: yes, you can have a relationship with God. That's it. Jesus made a way. The wall that maybe, or the distance that you feel between you and God, that gap, Jesus took that away when he went to the cross, and he took your offense and my offense and our sin, and he died for it, making a way for us to have right relationship with God. You can have a real, authentic friendship with God that starts today and it lasts forever. If that's something that you want to learn about, lean into, figure out, we want to really just put something in your hands that can help you walk you through those next steps. The simplest way is to text the word life to number 555-888. You're just going to get a text message back that's going to say, here's your book, and it's a really great resource to take those next steps in becoming friends with God. Jesus invites us into a totally new way of living. He invites us into life the way it was designed to be lived, that brings maximum fulfillment and happiness. But in order to do that, Jesus says, whoever wants to save their life must lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will find it. We have to be willing to lose our way and adopt the Jesus way when it comes to our relationships. So you really want to increase your happiness quotient in 2019? Pop the bubble and invest in your relationship with God and others. As you head out today, there's something we have called Connecting Point, where it's an opportunity, a showcase for you to just kind of see different ways to get connected. Maybe that's with a group or a ministry, an opportunity to serve. I want to challenge you, if you're not really connected here and you don't might really have friends here, that is a really good place to start. God is kind of putting that to you on a silver platter today. Spend an extra 5 minutes, look around, talk to some people, say, God, what do you want me to do? Who do you want me to connect with here? I want to pray for you. Jesus, we thank you for each individual here at the Millwoods campus, listening in at our Terwillegar campus or online. Lord, every soul represented here matters to you. Lord, help us in this way in our relationships. Lord, let us take on your way. Let us deny ourselves in this way and what we naturally want to do to live for ourselves, and help us to live for you and others. Lord, for those here who just need to repair a relationship, Lord, that is just so damaged, someone who is close, Lord, would you give them courage and wisdom, Lord? Would you let forgiveness begin to bubble up in their heart and life towards that person? Lord, for those who need to double down on a pre-existing relationship, Lord, would you give them courage to walk out the steps of wisdom in order to be intentional and real and more vulnerable in those relationships? For those here who just don't have friends, who are just lonely in their life, maybe they don't have family here, God, would you bring people into their life? Lord, would you also give them courage, Lord, to step out and make new connections? Lord, for those in this place who have lost someone, who this talk today is bringing to their minds a relationship of high quality that has been lost due to death or sickness recently, Lord, would you bring them ultimate comfort? Would you show them the friendship of God in a way that they've never experienced as well? And I also pray for others to come alongside them. Lord, and for those who need to begin and want to explore what a relationship with you looks like, Holy Spirit, would you do in their life what only you can do? Lord, would you remind them that you created them, that you love them, and that you want a relationship with them? Jesus, I pray for every couple, every individual, every family, that you be with them, that you bless them. Help us to love you and love our neighbors. We praise in your name. Amen.